Okay, we will call the regular meeting of the Policy Board of Directors of Monterey Bay Community Power, September 12th. It is now 10:45. We've had some traffic problems, so we don't have every member here, but we do have a quorum. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Director Brown is on her way. Kaufman Gomez? Termini?
Here.
Phillips?
Here.
Hoffa will be here, running late. Delgado is absent with notification. Orozco absent with notification. Munzer?
Here.
Freeman?
Here.
Vice Chair McShane?
Here.
And Chair McPherson.
Here. Okay, now we will have a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we will move to item number 3, public comment on matters not listed on the open session. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address us on an issue that is not on the agenda? Please come up. Where should they speak from, Brandon?
Right up here.
Right there. Okay, excuse me.
Okay. I'll be well under 3 minutes. So I just want to say that I believe that the most important thing that Monterey Bay Community Power can do.
Excuse me, sir, would you please give us your name and your residence, please?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Dave Lessicar. I live in Seaside, been a homeowner there for about 5 years. And, okay. So besides providing, 100% carbon-free energy, I think the next most important thing that can be done for our 3 counties is to provide carbon-free electricity at the lowest feasible price in order to motivate people to switch from fossil fuels to electricity for vehicles, for water heating, building heating, etc. As you guys know, recent studies and recent competitive bidding are not only showing that utility-scale carbon-free power is now less expensive than fossil fuel or nuclear, but they're also showing that the costs of utility-scale carbon-free power and storage keep dropping. The lower the price that MBCP could get for electricity, the more it would cut costs for our agriculture and tourist industries, making them more cost competitive, which should make it easier for them to sell more produce, rent and build more rooms, and hire more of our people. Better still, significantly cheaper electricity from MBCP might even induce some Silicon Valley companies to move some of their high electricity using operations to our area. To achieve all this, MBCP should seek the lowest price reliable offers for carbon-free electricity, whether it's solar from California's deserts, wind from Wyoming, or hydroelectric, to the extent that that's acceptable, from the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That's what we're aiming to do. Anybody else from the public who would like to address us on items not on the agenda? We'll go to item number 4, board member disqualifications. Is there a board member that can announce any reason for disqualification from discussion of any item on the agenda? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
would now be the time if board members just had any quick comments? Is that, I didn't see that on here.
Go ahead.
Oh, there it is. Sorry, it's at the end. No,
Yeah, it's at
sorry.
the
Okay.
end. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, so we'll we'll move to item number 5 for the consent agenda, which are items number 6, 7, and 8 on the minutes of June 6th, the schedule for the 2019 and the treasurer's report for information only. Any comments from the board? Any comments from the public?
Move consent. Second.
Moved and seconded, the consent item agenda be approved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered unanimously.
Chair, my apologies. I did not hear who moved or who seconded.
Oh.
Moved? Thank you.
On the regular agenda, the Community Advisory Council's report, and we welcome to hear anybody from the Community Advisory Council here today.
Mr. Chairman, I've just got a call from Jeff Byron, who's the chair of the Community Advisory Council. He apologizes for not being able to show up. He had something urgent that he had to attend to. So I'm going to give the report on his behalf. We also have it in writing, just added to your at your place. A number of things that they've done. The council met twice in the last couple of months, and they have appointed a chair and a vice chair. They decided on the regular meeting schedule, and they also got some training on the Brown Act. And finally, we gave him a presentation on fiscal year 2018-2019. Is not as extensive as the one that you have received in your packet. Nevertheless, it pretty much gave him the summary of what we plan to do. That is pretty much what took place in the last couple of months for the Advisory Commission, and I'll be glad to answer any questions on behalf of Mr. Byron.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the audience, any that they would like to have? I'm sure glad to see that the photos of the Community Advisory Board members are on our budget, or attachment that we have here, I should say.
One thing I want to add, they actually looked at, we put together bylaws for them. Actually, Angela did that, and they looked at it, reviewed it, gave us a set of comments, and we're going to give them the final this month when we meet with them next week.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. I don't think that needs any action. That item number 10, the Operations Board Director's Report. Yes?
You want to provide a public opportunity to comment?
I thought I did. I thought
Oh, I'm
I'd
sorry, I
asked.
didn't hear that. If you did.
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there anybody from the public that would like to address us on the community? Okay. We'll go to the Operations Board of Directors report, item number 10.
Thank you, Chairman McPherson and Policy Board members. The Operations Committee has been very busy, and so I'm going to have a short report because I know you have many things to cover this morning and part of the afternoon. So at the Operations Board, we've ratified your approval of the operation rules and regulations under which we operate. We did do a purchase agreement, 15-year renewable supply with Duran Mesa LLC. This is a major wind farm, 200 megawatts, that will come online in 2020, December. And we believe over the life of the 15-year contract it would be about $230 million, but we think because the price is competitive, we'll be able to lock this in and save about $3 million annually in our portfolio. So this also meets our 44% of SB 350 in terms of our carbon and renewable resource portfolio. We approved a sponsorship policy. We continued M-Press for printing and mailing services, and we also approved mayor accounting to continue accounting and annual audit assistance services. We are unique in that we've also approved an energy risk management policy, which will serve as a guide for procurement of our energy inventory and supplies. Very unique in terms of the CCAs in this state. And I think it's very wise the staff pointed that out and developed it. And we went through it at the Operations Board. There are 3 items that I'll just mention that we approved for your consideration. They're on your agenda today. One is to retire the loan and the line of credit. Remember, we had a loan with River City Bank, a non-revolving loan, and then we also had revolving lines of credit. And so I'm glad, I'm sure you'll be happy to hear from at least the counties, Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito. You're now released from your guarantees, so you'll have the money back. This also approves compensating Santa Cruz County for the expenses they provide up front. So I think that's close to $500,000. We were able to do this because we're financially stable as of March 2018. This is in the budget for 2018 and 19. It's about a $6.2 million payoff. We did add and delete and reclassify a couple positions. We eliminated the finance director position. We added a couple positions in the communications external affairs, and then we're suggesting reclassifying the energy planning manager. And that's on your agenda, item 15. And most important probably is the consideration of the 2018-2019 operating budget. We did approve that. It's very difficult to approve something that's sort of moving pieces. Tom will explain that. But we did approve the base budget. We're satisfied with that. We think that's a good budget. It does propose $228 million with programs funded at 2% of total revenues, and the remaining surplus revenue will be allocated, as we said before, 80% to reserves and 20% to rebates. The base case includes a 15% increase in PCIA that's projected and a 7.5% generation rate reduction from PG&E. So those are the two main variables, but I'm sure Tom will explain the latest with the PCIA and the CPUC rulings on that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I tried to make that as short as possible.
You did, and it's great news. Terrific. We're ahead of schedule. I would like to announce also Director Hoffa from Monterey has been here. I know he had the schedule there. Thank you for being here. Are there any questions from the board members? We're going to hear more about the budget, of course, subsequently. Is there any comments from the public? Just kudos. Thank you for everything. I can't overstate how important the operations board. This is a new setup of community choice energy or aggregation agencies, and it's working very well. We really appreciate your expertise and bringing this to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, now from the CEO's report, item number, I did ask for any comments from the public. Okay, number 11, CEO's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Discussion item.
A few things to report on today. Most important is the power adjustment, the power indifference adjustment proceeding that's taken place at the CPUC. A number of hearings already been in place, and two decisions were rendered. One by the administrative law judge that resides over the case, and another by one of the commissioners that also is the appointed commissioner to deal with this issue. Just to explain, the power charge indifference adjustment is what Pacific Gas and Electric collects from the customers, our customers, in order to make their bundled customers, the one that's staying with them, indifferent to the fact that PG&E at one point or another bought resources on behalf of all of their customers, including ours. And now some of these resources are surplus and not worth in the market as much as they are at the time they PG&E bought them. So that's in essence what the PCIA is. So it is the difference between the cost of PG&E's resources less the cost of or the value of these resources in the marketplace today. And that value gets calculated every year, and that changes the PCIA number every year. Obviously, we have differences in the way we want to calculate these two values. They want to include everything that they have on the generation side, including the kitchen sink, if they can help it. We believe some of these resources that they include in the list are not appropriate to be included by law. At the same time, we value these resources in the marketplace at a different way than the way they value it. And that's where the discrepancy comes in. Right now, they believe they are collecting less than what's due them. We believe they are collecting more than what is due them. And so the CPUC has been looking into this issue for quite some time. And we got two decisions now, one by the judge and one by the commissioner. Eventually, the full commission will render a decision on this issue on September 27th. So we're getting there. In a couple of weeks, we'll have some idea about what the basis for calculating the PCIA will be like. After that, PG&E will take that decision and they will start to actually calculate the PCIA for 2019. It's likely that they will be able to get it done by November 1st. Doubtful. They may take a couple more weeks to be able to make it happen. And once they do, then we'll have a clear idea about what the PCIA number looks like. And two, which is more important, what is the generation cost the PG&E will have for their customer is like, because these two numbers affect us. If the generation cost for PG&E is bundled customers go down, we have to reduce our generation cost correspondingly. And if the PCIA goes up, then we have to reduce our generation cost again in order to accommodate the fact that the PCIA now is gone up. We will be able to know for sure. I would probably venture a guess of sometime around mid-November, maybe early December, and we'll be able to come back to you probably during the December meeting with some updated numbers on the revenue side. The cost side is not going to change much. That you're going to see in the budget today, that's going to pretty much stay the way it is. The cost of the supply that we've already committed to is in place. We are committed to that supply. It's not going to change. The amount of power we need to buy is pretty much the same. We locked in prices already pretty much for most of what we need for 2019, so that's not going to change. What will change is the revenue, our estimate of the revenue. And later on today, you're going to hear about number of options that we looked at and why we picked the one that we picked. And the budget today is based on the assumptions that we made regarding where the generation rates for PG&E will be and where the PCIA will be. That's the first thing that I wanted to report on. Needless to say, we are incredibly active with CalCCA in order to get as much of what we can get out of this proceeding as possible. The other thing that I wanted to give you a quick update on is the enrollment. Now that all the residential customers are in, we are at about 3% of the commercial customers, about 1.5% of the residential customers have opted out. So the numbers look pretty good so far, and we're hoping to keep them that way and also go back and find out some of the largest customers why they opted out and try to bring them back in. Two other things to report on. We are in negotiations for 2 long-term contracts. One is 15 years and the other is 20 years for solar plus storage. We've been in negotiations for quite some time now. We, at this point, are about 95-98%. We could have got one of them to you this month, but we decided to hold back on both of them until we see how the PCIA is going to settle. Then we'll go back and ask the question, do we want to go ahead and sign these 2 contracts? If we do, then we'll take them to the operations board in October. Finally, the Go Local, the Go Local RFO, we've been looking at adding 20 megawatts as we've shared with you in the past. We've got all the proposals. They are coming fairly high priced. We've narrowed down the scope down to something less than 20 megawatt, but we also putting that on hold until we see where the PCIA proceeding is going. Then we'll be able to bring you something back in the next meeting. With that, I'll stop. Mr. Chairman, be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions from the board. Mr. Termini, Capitol.
We actually, I would venture a guess that we are the best so far. I know the one that I thought was better was Silicon Valley Clean Energy, but as it turned out, when you measure it by demand, not by number of customers, they're up to about 6 or 7% opt-out so far. We are less. We just hit the 3%, and I think, but we're definitely less than 4. That's measured by demand.
Very good. Excellent news. Mr. Phillip, did you have no? Any other questions, Mr. Hoffa, Monterey?
Yeah, on the, I understand the kind of the logic and behind the PCIA, but I'm wondering if
we could make an argument in time that it should sunset because it's predicated on decisions that were made under certain assumptions of, user base. But that should eventually, those decisions should sort of wane. And just would encourage us to work with our legislative liaisons to see if we can get legislation that would eventually sunset this at a time that would be reasonable based on the length of those contracts.
Of course, both are actually, you're right on both counts. One is that these resources are to sunset. Some of them, for example, the ones that were built after 2002, there was directive from the CPUC saying that you can only include those for 10 years, then you just have to figure out a way to deal with it after that. Because if you continuously have those resources in there indefinitely, then there's no incentive for the investor-owned utilities to manage their resources appropriately to try to bring them, at least price-wise, into market. So we are arguing this. We are also arguing that the utility-owned generation that was built prior to 2002, all those hydro plants, for example, that they have sitting there for the last 50 years, that they are trying to relicense, and all of them are above market. Why are we the ones that have to shoulder the responsibility and the overpayment that they are making in order to keep these resources around? There is a phase 2 to the proceedings, and the phase 2 basically saying that the investor-owned utilities will need to auction their resources. All the resources that they have above market, they need to auction them in order to establish the correct value for those resources. So that is coming forth. As far as the legislation is concerned, that is now the discussion at the California CCA, California Customer Choice Association, that we need to start talking about getting a sponsor to and draft legislation in order to deal with this issue, because it is very difficult for us to try to plan or do anything that has any long-term effect. We always have to stay within 1 year, because I don't know if next year our revenue will be what I thought it is, or it will be 20% lower. So it's exactly what, I mean, so far the revenue that you're going to see today is roughly about 15% lower than what we thought it would be back in the last meeting that we got together. That's just not a way for us to be able to plan or do anything of long-term nature. So we will have to run legislation in order to kind of fix this problem.
Thank you. Good question. Good question. I'd like to mention that Director Brown is here from Santa Cruz. Any other questions from the board on this? Questions from the audience? Any questions? Okay. Yes.
How's that? Any update with the state in terms of any bills that were signed by the governor? Was there a big meeting yesterday that was occurring?
237, right? Yeah.
I don't know if he signed 237. I did not get anything today that implies that he did or did not. I know that he signed the fire bill and he signed the SB 100. Those were signed, and he wanted to make sure that they get signed before today's summit that he's having up in San Francisco, and it's an international summit. So he wanted to get these two legislation out. But I haven't seen what he's done so far vis-a-vis 237.
Yeah, for what it's worth, we've had contact with some people in the governor's office of our feelings on that. So we'll see what happens. Okay, we can move on. There was no questions from the audience. Okay, we'll move to item number 12, a really great item, an action item. Approve retirement of River City Bank non-revolving and revolving lines of credit by September 30th, 2018. Mr. Bashi?
Sure, I'm going to ask Tiffany, who's been working very hard on that, to come up and give us a quick presentation.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Good morning. Tiffany Law, Director of Internal Operations. Let me share the good news with you. Okay, for the background, in February last year, NBCP members entered into a JPA stipulating that the County of Santa Cruz will fund administrative and legal services until we can obtain loans to fund our startup activities. We agreed to pay the initial cost of the county staff time and any actual out-of-pocket expenses. The initial costs were $563,000. In October last year, we entered into a credit agreement with River City Bank to obtain a $3 million non-revolving line of credit and a $10 million revolving line of credit. The purpose of the $3 million non-revolving line of credit was to fund our startup and implementation capital. We received 3 advances totaling $3 million from October last year to May this year. The counties of Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito share in the obligations as guarantors. After paying off the non-revolving line of credit by the end of this month, the guarantees and any associated obligations will be retired, and the County of San Benito's deposits will be returned. The purpose of the $10 million revolving line of credit was to fund the negative cash flow during the first few months of operation and to fund the reserves to support our power purchase agreements. We made 2 advances, totaling $2.6 million in December 2017, of which $1.1 million was for the debt service reserve and the $1.5 million was for the power purchase agreements reserve. After paying off the revolving line of credit by the end of this month, we will retain it to be used as needed. The total loan repayment is $6.2 million, and it has been included in our budget forecast. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to, personally, fantastic news. I want to thank everybody on the staff and just the operations that we've had. We're ahead of schedule, and this is just as good as it gets, I think. It can get. Any comments from the board?
Yes, I think it shows how fiscally responsible the agency is, which is great. The line itself, will you have it available if there's a need for it in the future? I know you have a zero balance on it, but you've got a good relationship with them. I would think that maybe there might be something that would ever have that be left open or renewed if it's necessary for many
We will
cases.
keep the $10 million revolving line of credit open and will use as needed.
I should add
Yes.
that it doesn't cost us anything to keep it open, by the way.
Yes, Mr. Hoffa from Monterey.
Yeah, I would just echo what Director McPherson said, thanking the staff. But then also I want to congratulate all of the jurisdictions. We all assumed some risk. We all bound ourselves together. And now that risk is retired. And so I think this is a great cause to celebrate.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I too would like to echo the other comments and just suggest that maybe we should publicize this to every possible media outlet there is to let everybody know, because there's only a few people who watch the YouTube channels and things like that. So we need to let everyone know that this has happened and that this is really good news.
I think that's a good directive, and I think that we have a motion to approve that be included. My suggestion that we have staff release this to all the news outlets. Any other questions from the board? Questions from the audience? Okay.
So move the recommendation.
Second.
Then moved and seconded. All those in favor for item number 12?
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered unanimously. Show me the money. Now to appoint a board and audit finance committee. This is an action item. Are you Stephanie or no? Okay.
Sure, Tiffany, go ahead.
Okay. Under the Article 7, Section 3 of our operating rules and regulations, the Audit and Finance Committee is a permanent standing committee and consists of up to 5 voting members, made up of the directors from the Policy and Operations Boards. All members of the committee should be selected by the chair of the Policy Board and have knowledge about governmental accounting and finance issues. The committee will meet quarterly and will schedule additional meetings as needed. They will serve 2 3-year terms with the duties of advising on budgeting, audits, financial planning, reporting, internal controls, policies, and investments, reviewing the proposed annual budget, providing oversight of the preparation of the annual audit and review the completed audit reports, recommending policies and procedures on financial matters to the Policy Board, and also performing other duties as assigned by the Policy Board. The first task for the Audit and Finance Committee is to work with staff to complete our first annual audit after the close of this fiscal year in September 2018. The formation of this committee has no financial impact.
Any questions from the board? Yes, Ms. Kaufman-Gomez.
How do we address 2 3-year consecutive terms with the board here in the rotation that the board members have to cover this, the criteria here?
May I suggest something? And I think the action today is going to be, if you decide to have the Finance and Audit Committee made up of the policy board members, then we have to figure out how to address this issue. But if you decide that this is something that's more suitable for the operations board, then maybe the action will be to delegate this to the operations board and have them among themselves put together this committee. And if they do, then this issue is not an issue anymore, because you can have more consistency coming from the operations board than you would here.
Would it be possible, if it were to be handled that way, to be taken maybe to the executive board for the review before it comes to our board for final approval, so that there's another process that this agency can see before this board here actually takes a vote on the items? Just one more. I know it sounds like one more layer, but just so that there's a pass through once before it comes to us, if we're going to be having operations handle that process. Does that make sense?
So you're saying that maybe if it was the operations board that would take this, would that require an amendment to the Article 7, Section 3 if it was just a policy, the operations board members?
I don't believe so, Angela. I think it's you are allowed, or the JPA allows either board to form as many committees as you want, and as you feel appropriate. So, the Finance and Audit Committee is a pretty standard committee that every agency has. The question is, who would you like to be on that committee? Is it a combination of policy board members and an operations board member, or is it just operations board member or just policy board members? It's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're the deciding body that needs to figure this one out. Then we'll follow up with the appropriate committee after that.
Okay. Director McShane?
Yeah, no, I think we should move that direction and have both operations and policy board members. Yeah, and I say we move forward. As to the term, the chair is going to make the appointments. So, if somebody's out of office, then I'm sure there'll be another fresh body to put on the committee.
Yeah, but we also still have some that are on our board that actually rotate off as well, because they're covering jurisdictions instead of the actual permanent seats. So
we'll have to manage that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can manage that, or if it is directed by the policy board chair to do that. We can adapt to that, I think, very well. Yes, sir. Mr.
I concur. I think a combination of policy
Yeah.
and operations makes sense.
Okay. So we'll have, yes, Ms. Brown from Santa Cruz.
The way I read it prior to the meeting was, I just assumed that there would be a combination. Do we need or want to have a discussion about the number of seats?
Sure.
It says up to 5, but I don't have any particular preference for that, but it might be worth just.
You can give direction to me if you'd like to have 3 members of the policy board, and 2, or however you want to do it.
I would think 3 for operations and 2 for policy, because I know that we need to have a second look at this. We don't want to just hand it over to the operations for the whole process and then it comes to us for the last approval. There should be a stopgap in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Okay. Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Okay, then I think what it will do is entertain a motion.
So move the item with 3 operations board members designated and 2 policy board members designated.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered unanimously.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
Would it be possible to add another motion to appoint 2 people now from the policy board and delegate delegate to the operations board appointing 3 members from their board.
Sure, I could do that.
Do we need a motion?
Do we need a
Doesn't
motion?
look like we do. Selected by the chair.
Yeah, I think, and my thought was to find out who's interested in the first place. Might be a good idea. I could get that now. There are some members who are not here, of course. If you could give me, indicate your interest of this after the meeting to me, I'd appreciate it, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
How's that? Okay?
Chair, I didn't hear who seconded it as well. Okay.
Okay, now we move on to item number 14, to appoint a board executive committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this came up in the last meeting. There was a discussion about the need for an executive committee, and it was decided that first we need to go and survey the other CCAs to see if they do have a similar committee. We indeed did that, and most of the agencies that are our size do have an executive committee that looks at certain issues. They differed as to what that committee did. Eventually, from that survey, we decided to recommend to you the formation of an executive committee that will be made up, again, of either policy board members or a combination of policy board and operations board members. And the main task for them will be to review the CEO's performance, to discuss in-depth legislative and regulatory policy platform, to discuss the package and the compensation schedule for the staff, and to address any other issues that that the board asked of them, either the operations or the policy board. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop and answer any questions.
I think it's proper that we do have an executive committee. I don't know how the makeup should be. We just had the operations, 3 operations, 2 policy. This might be different, I think, but
I think
I would like to hear from.
recommendation is the flip. Yeah.
You just, okay, let's have some discussion. What's your thought?
I'll throw out the idea that 3 of the members from the policy would be the chair and the vice chair, and one other member appointed by the chair, and then the chair and the vice chair from the operations.
Okay.
It could be an emotion, yes. I thought we were still in the discussion stage, but.
So,
But we need public comments.
yeah, I want to have public comment, but I have not lobbied for this, and so I don't want to make it seem like that was the case at all. The discussion is that 3 policy board members be on this executive committee, consisting of the chair and vice chair, and then 1 other member, and then 2 from the operations committee, the chair and vice chair of the operations committee. Is that correct? I mean, that's your suggestion. It's not a formal motion yet. We can have some more discussion on that.
So are you talking about chair and vice chair being your position and Steve's position, and then 1 alternate from the board?
One other member.
One other additional member from the board.
It doesn't have to be that way, but
okay.
it can be. I'm open for discussion.
We did not talk.
Yeah.
And that was just a suggestion.
Well, if we're taking it back for you in terms of recommendation, I mean, as busy as everybody is, whether that's something to make an additional commitment, not only chairing this one, but going and doing that one as well. But maybe having the conversation like you recommended for the finance, that if anybody has the interest to see you afterwards.
Yeah, I think I would leave it. Well, maybe we should, well, did you have a comment on this? Anybody else? I'm going to ask the public if they have any input on this. Okay, so coming back to the board, yes. Mr. Phillips.
I think leave it more flexible for the chair to appoint 3 people from the policy and 2 from the, because
Time
like,
constraints.
Like she said, time restraints, it may lock in where McShane can't be there or something.
Yeah, that's good, and I'd like to know the interests of everybody. If you'd like to be on one, we want to have as many people on this board engaged as possible, and I don't have to be on everything, believe me.
Right.
But,
Yes, spread you too thin there.
Yeah,
It's
but
too
that's
much.
okay. I would entertain a motion that that would be 5 members, 3 from policy, 2 from the the operations board, and that I contact members of interest and come back to form the committee in the December meeting, I would assume.
So moved.
I'll second the motion on that.
Okay. Moved and seconded, Ms. Shane, Kaufman, Gomez. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So ordered. Okay, now we have approved proposed additions, deletions, and reclassification of Monterey Bay Community Power staff positions. This is
Stephanie,
a recommendation from the operations board, I believe.
can I ask Stephanie Law to step up and introduce this item as well?
Thank you.
Since September last year, the Policy Board approved 2 amendments to our organization chart. The total approved headcount currently is at 23 full-time staff and 3 part-time staff. Based on current assessment and priorities, we recommend to eliminate the finance manager because her accountancy is essentially performing the duties, not just for us, but also for the majority of the CCAs in California. To add 2 new positions. The first one is for the Energy Programs Manager to manage our soon-to-be local energy programs. The second one is for the Community Outreach and Events Coordinator bilingual position to focus on the outreach activities for the Spanish-speaking community. And also to retitle the Energy Planning Manager position to Power Supply Analyst. The analyst position will increase the power supply team's ability to conduct additional portfolio modeling and analysis. The recommended changes will reduce the current salary and benefits package by $16,000 or 0.01% of our proposed operating revenues for the fiscal year 18-19. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Yes, Kaufman Gomez.
Part of the comment I have is giving the CEO the ability to do some of the flexing with the positions and whatnot, and discretion about some of that flexibility versus every single time that there's an adjustment from one pay scale down to the other. Can we give him a little bit more room to work with instead of having to go through board approval? Because the process of the board approval could be, our next meeting is December. So what if there's something that happens between now and then and they can't do anything because of having to go through this process for something that seems to be pretty minor of a $16,000 difference when it comes to a budget? Can we allow more discretion for that flexibility for our CEO here?
I think it's a good suggestion. I'm not sure exactly what number we might fall on, but it seems like, it's a lot of, it's a time factor more than anything, and what we need at a time that could be less than 3 months away. So I like that suggestion. I don't know where we might put the parameters in there. Does anybody have a suggestion, Mr. Hoffa?
I appreciate the intent, but personally, I think that staffing and organizational structure is pretty important, and I think it is something the policy board should be involved in. I'm not aware that this isn't working, and incidentally, I do support the proposal, the staff recommendation. So I would be wary about surrendering that kind of oversight, I guess.
Okay, Mr. Termini?
Wouldn't it make more sense to leave this to the operations board, because that is really what they do, and that is the function, and the staffing is the operations of the organization. Why is it coming to the policy board? The operation board meets more often, yes?
Right.
So that would solve both problems.
Mr. Bashi, do you see any problem?
I can, when it comes to headcount, I definitely want to make sure that the boards know about it. So I will not, on my own, increase the headcount without coming to you. I don't mind if you give me the leverage of being able to retitle a position as long as it is at a lower compensation. That I'll take that. I think that probably will make my life a little easier. But definitely anything that involves increasing the headcount, I need to come back to you first.
Very well. Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah, Mr. McShane.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as it relates to the budget, if he's going to spend more money, then that needs to come. So obviously saving money, we can take it up, or the chair can take it up with the CEO following this meeting. But as it relates to this item, to keep it specific to this item only, obviously it needs to go to the public. But I'm very supportive.
Yeah, and I think it should be coming to the policy committee.
Yeah, because if anything were to, when it comes to the budget proposal, they're going to say, we're anticipating needing this number of positions, and we will then certainly be making a vote on all of that being disclosed at that point. But just a little shifting back and forth here, and let's keep it streamlined if we can, and if we're not making a fiscal impact of it.
If I may add, our budget is always assumes that we are fully staffed and everybody's getting paid at the top position. So the dollars in the budget really are inflated because we are never fully staffed, it seems, so far. And
we're not paying the top.
There's nobody is getting the top pay at this
Not
point.
yet, yeah. Or not everybody is, for sure. You know,
So
that's
I'm not worried
guarantee.
about the
Yeah.
dollars part of it because the dollars are always there to deal with this issue. But from my perspective, I don't want to ever have increased the headcount on my own. I always want to come back to you folks, let you know about it, and I think that's important that you know who's working for your organization
Right.
and what positions they hold and why.
Okay, so if it's something, yes.
But
Mr.
looking
Friedman.
at the organization chart, to the far right, I see that everything is vacant, and we've just had a discussion on the PUC and Chairperson Peterman, I believe it was, and so I would like to suggest that we try and fill one of those two slots in particular, because I think we need a full-time person communicating with Sacramento, and I believe the PUC is in San Francisco, communicating with those two organizations on pretty much a full-time basis. And so I
I
would
believe in 10 days we scheduled a bunch of interviews for the general counsel. So that is in the works. I would like to bring the general counsel first before we bring in the other two positions that would be reporting to him or her. Having said that, I should note that we actually have a lot of lawyers working on our behalf. One of them is sitting right on my left. We actually have two other lawyers that work in one on the regulatory side, and that's a firm that's working not just for us, but working for a whole bunch of other CCAs. And we're working through Cal CCA. We have another lawyer working over there that handles the PCIA issue and a variety of other issues. We pay Cal CCA roughly about $150. This year we're going to be paying them $150,000, so they can handle all the regulatory filings that we need to do. So it's not like we're not spending money there. We are. And finally, we do have another lawyer that helps us on the negotiations for power supply contracts.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so I think we'll leave this that in essence, if the classification, if it's less money, then you can just go ahead and do it. If it's more, you'll come to us to talk to us about it.
We'll do.
Right. I think that's the way it's understood. I don't know that it needs a motion, so we'll move on. Any other questions from the board? Okay.
Does this item need a motion then?
Yes.
It does need a motion because, okay, we have a, okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
you haven't established that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yet, so we would appreciate the motion. Then from now on, I know what to do.
Very well. Okay.
And we still need the public comments, by the way.
I thought I'd opened that up. No.
Oh,
Okay.
got it.
Any public comments? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board.
So
You might
moved.
state the motion exactly, so it's clearly.
Move the recommendation with the direction to the CEO that in the future, if there are savings in a reclassification, it would not require board approval.
I'll second the motion on that.
Moved and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So ordered unanimously. Here we come now to the item number 16, the 2018-19 operating budget. It's an action item. It's also been recommended by the Operations Board. And before we go into comment, I'd just like to make a statement about, when we were talking about Monterey Bay Community Power, or regions, 16 cities and 3 counties that are now involved, the core of our advocacy was really based on a combined environmental protection and economic prosperity, shall we say, attributes as equal measures. And I think we've accomplished that. Our CEO and staff are demonstrating with this budget that Monterey Bay Community Power is providing a better economic and environmental option and outcomes they're even better than we imagined, as we just saw in some of our financial reports. But to provide 100% carbon-free electricity at a cost savings, and that was the basis of our proposal. We wanted to prudently build our reserves. We're going to be able to do that and still be able to invest more than $16 million into the community in the form of rebates and complementary programs is really a tremendous success story. I want to thank our CEO, Tamabashi, and all of the staff, and it's not a full staff yet, as we've just seen, for their dedication and hard work during this past year. Many of them were doing 2 or 3 jobs that now can be, shall we say, they can assign some of those tasks now, but they're still doing plenty of work, believe me. You have demonstrated, I think, in this whole region, and this board has, that we're really passionate about our environmental protection and our energy future. I want to say thank you to everybody on the board and the operations board too. That it's the first time that this kind of a setup has been done in the state, that we have an operations board and a policy board. And I think it's been proven to be very successful. And so I want to appreciate that. And then the Community Action Committee too. We certainly have challenges ahead, and we're facing some right now in Sacramento. The PCIA, Senate Bill 237, we're making calls. We're being very aggressive, and I think we have forestalled some last year. This year, they're equally pressing, and they're going to be in the future, believe me. This is not a standstill story. We're going to have to, in essence, defend ourselves, but at the same time, I'd like to say promote ourselves for what we're doing and the successes we're having, because we are going to meet my understanding of the state's greenhouse gas emissions criteria reduction set for 2030 by next year. It's going to be done. So it's because of this agency and everybody. This has been a tremendous cooperative effort, and there's nothing like it in the state. A tri-county, multi-city, multi-county effort that's ever been done in inception. And I want to thank everybody for the efforts that they've put in so far. But we need to continue to be conservative with our fiscal management. It was stated with the PCIA uncertainty, and it'll be more legislative uncertainty coming in the future. But with these uncertainties, I just think that we have a solid foundation. We've responded. We've initiated some lobbying efforts, if you will, ourselves that have been very successful, and we've been able to stave off some issues in the legislature. And I hope we can do that this year. But I want to really just thank everybody for what they've done and the participation they've had. It's been phenomenal. It's better than I could have imagined 5 years ago, honestly. Anyway, with our operating budget, I would like to have Mr. Bashi present that. And thank you and the staff very much for everything.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate the compliments. Our presentation hopefully won't take long. I want to start it fairly quickly. Then after that, I'm going to ask the 3 department heads to come up. 2 of them will give a quick presentation about what they're looking forward next year. Then Tiffany will come up and present the entire budget for you. Just very quickly, I wanted to talk about the accomplishments that we have achieved in the last roughly 11 months of operation. Actually, since we started, since we launched back in March 1st and now, so it's more like 7 months. First, we looked at it from the viewpoint of what the JPA said and ranked, and I don't want to say even ranked. I think it's the way it was listed in the JPA. It was provide for carbon-free or reduce greenhouse gas. See to it that you reduce the customer's bills or cost relative to where they were otherwise would be, and finally invest locally in a community. So I'm going to take them one at a time. When it comes to reducing greenhouse gas, we started at the gate with 100% carbon-free, a combination of RPS, solar, and wind, and hydro, the combination of all three, is now and likely for this year and next year will get us at about 100% carbon free. Then we are beginning to think and shift the thinking of the minds of many of the folks that put this agency together, that we need to now tackle with the transportation sector as well as the building sector, because that's when we can affect a lot of greenhouse gas reduction and do that at considerably less money than other programs that are being implemented throughout the state. We've signed one long-term wind project that will be good enough to meet about 10% of our needs, and that is a 15-year project that will commence operation at the end of 2020. And we are in the process of working on two other projects that are solar plus storage, and we're looking at October timeframe to sign both agreements if all goes well. That is the contribution that we've done so far to reducing greenhouse gas, the top goal that you folks had in the JPA. In terms of reduction of customer cost, we offer a 3% rebate over what PG&E would have otherwise charged the customers. That applies to every customer, to every customer class category, whatever that is that they paid us, 3%, which equals exactly what they would have paid PG&E. They will get 3% back. That's that simple. And also for the folks that have solar rooftops and behind the meter net generation, we will be paying them more than twice as much as PG&E is offering their customers now. Finally, I want to just spend a minute or two on this, and that's the investment in the community. And a lot of people thought of the investment in community is to build resources here, and they stopped right there. Well, I don't look at it that way. I think there's a lot of investments that we are doing in the local economy, and one of them, for example, is the potentially 20 megawatt of Go Local that we are looking at right now. But the fact that you've opened an office here, and that office had 20 people and 3 coming, and paying a lease for somebody who owns this office, that is contribution to local economy. That is dollar amount being spent in the community for high-paying jobs. Also, the data manager that we're working with decided to open an office right here. They're on the 2nd floor now, and they hired 5 people, and they're out there working on our behalf, dealing with customer calls. We've signed contracts with local providers, whether that to be on marketing side or the communication side or printing, and worth about last year $450,000 that we spend locally right here. That's also investment in local economy. The California CCA annual meeting, which some of you attended, was held right here at Silomar, and we're working pretty hard on making sure that they hold it back again next year and years to follow.
He lives within 1 mile of Silomar. I want to let you know.
It's totally coincidental. Mr. Chairman. We are, as I've announced to you, working with MBOD as well as CCA on putting together a program that would be worth about $12 million to install fast chargers throughout the Tri-County. I think that's a huge win that we have managed to get that in less than a year from starting operation. We will contribute 25% of that, and MBOD will contribute the other 25%, and CEC, the California Energy Commission, will contribute the other 50%. That is, there's a lot of money to be invested in placing a lot of chargers all around town. That is a huge contribution in my mind to local economy. And we also supported and despite Cal CCA's opposition to it, we supported PG&E's call for building battery storage right here in place of the plant that's located at Moss Landing. I think this is a good thing for the economy. There will be lots of jobs. Battery storage. This is the largest ever in the world, put in one location, and we are in support of it. The CPUC will render a decision on whether they can do that, and if they can, how big the plant should be sometime in November of this year. All this, Mr. Chairman, is a contribution, I believe, in the local economy. One thing also to mention that whatever money that we can save our customers, as was called upon earlier by one of our citizens, whatever money that we save the customer that they don't have to spend on electricity is money that those customers can take and spend in the local economy. They can spend to probably buy an EV or put an electric heater instead of the natural gas heaters that they have. All that, I believe, is a contribution to local economy. And with that, I'm going to ask Dennis, I believe, is next to come in. And, oh, by the way, yeah, this is the biggest accomplishment. We are in business. Dennis is going to talk to us about the power supply, what's going on in that area.
Good morning. Dennis Deach O'Neill, Director of Power Services. So our proposed budget for next year is over $174 million. It's primarily made up of our energy for carbon-free and renewable energy, with another 11% for resource adequacy products. Next slide. So as has been mentioned, the joint RFO that was run with Silicon Valley Clean Energy last September is about to be completed. We executed the agreement with the wind farm in June, and we're going to be bringing to the board, the ops board, in October, the completed agreements for the two solar plus storage projects. I think that the two CCAs working together produced a very robust response of bidders, and so we had very attractive offers and at attractive prices. And once these battery projects come online, we'll really have moved the needle on strengthening the grid and bringing price stability to the marketplace. Next slide. As also has been mentioned, the Go Local, which we issued in May, we had a very good response, and we are currently reviewing the offers, and because of the PCIA uncertainty, we are putting off our making of a selection until late October. We had originally planned to do so in the middle of this month, but we've chosen to wait. And that concludes mine. Thank you.
Next, JR is going to come and talk to us about marketing and communication.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Tom. I'm J.R. Killiger, the Director of Communications and External Affairs, and as Tom so aptly put it, we are in business, and we have successfully launched this pretty amazing Community Choice Energy program. But in terms of quick highlights on marketing communications, we are in great shape in terms of enrollment. I know there's been a lot of buzz on social media and other kind of channels, but that's normal. Every other CCA in the state suffers that in the first few months of enrollment, but it does settle down. The big thing that we have in our favor is our rebates, but also the program dollars that are flowing back in the community. We're the only CCA that actually can quantify the economic value of this program that's going to be reinvested in the community. Some major highlights just in terms of the level of engagement. I think we're well over 140 presentations and events. That's almost one a day for the last 7 or 8 months. We also had 2 great individual events that we partnered with MBARD around the Clean Air Fair, as well as the Community Power Festival, which happened up in Santa Cruz. And additionally, I wanted to highlight the last bullet point. Our team partnered with Univision and a couple of the food banks to actually go and do bi-weekly lunch and learns with some of the agricultural workers on the farmlands across the 3-county area. This is the first time a CCA of our kind has kind of really gone out and communicated with the underserved communities about what this program means to them. And I think we're able to reach about 250 of our customers that we otherwise would have never had contact with. And they also did a Facebook Live that I think reached another 1,200 customers. So I think overall we reached an additional 1,500 underserved customers that no other CCA has been able to kind of reach of that scale. So I just wanted to give a big shout out in terms of the partnerships that we as an agency are looking at all customers from every walk of life. And there's still work to be done, but I want to just kind of acknowledge that in terms of the uniqueness of us addressing those communities. Next slide. In terms of the marketing communications budget, we're kind of moving into our next stage in our development, our evolution in terms of who we are as, you know, kind of a thrifty startup and what we want to become more of a trusted public agency. So we have a lot of great agenda items on tap in terms of just continued engagement, continued outreach, but we're looking at also revamping our website, developing video content, kind of short social media video content, as well as moving towards developing a new community outreach plan. Like, what does it mean now that we've gone through the enrollment in terms of engaging all of our communities effectively? And then last but certainly not least, next slide, for programs. We're really excited that we have this level of investment available to be brought back into the community. We're approaching this from a strategic approach in the sense that we want to look at where's the lowest hanging fruit, how can we get the most bang for our buck in the first year of operation, but also looking towards the future. So as Tom mentioned, it's nothing short of amazing that the CEC has awarded this area millions of dollars for EV infrastructure. And so we're hoping with a partnership with us and MBARD, we'll be able to invest even more. So we're going to be able to kind of bring out all 3 counties, lay out a whole bunch of great infrastructure and bring good jobs to this area that otherwise wouldn't have happened if this CCA hadn't been launched. In terms of looking to the future, we want to look at storage, energy efficiency, electrification, really how we can bring up this whole region with this agency and provide opportunities to reduce carbon, also reinvest in the Tri-County region. So on that note, my section is done.
Thank you, JR. Tiffany's going to come in and present the budget.
It's my pleasure to share with all of you for our proposed budget for fiscal year 18-19. This is our budget process timeline. You can see that on August 16th, we introduced our budget to the Community Advisory Council. And on September 5th, we presented it to the Operations Board for their recommendation to the Policy Board. And today, we will submit our budget to the Policy Board for your approval and adoption. Our budget assumptions overview. This is a balanced budget, which means the proposed revenue is higher than the proposed expenses. And fiscal year 18-19 is our first full year of operations. And we use the zero-based budgeting approach, which means all the expenses must be justified. Budget is built around what is needed for the upcoming fiscal year. And the strategic plan and the CEO goals were our guide. As mentioned by Tom earlier, there were many variables impacting our 18-19 expected revenues. The most significant factor is driven by the changes of PG&E rates and the PCIA. To address the challenges due to the ongoing CPUC proceeding, we altered the calculation for the revenues, reserves, programs, and rebates into 3 future scenarios. The first one is the base case. We increased 15% in PCIA and decreased 7.5% for the generation rate. And then we are using this for our proposed revenue calculation. The second one is the best case. We increased 10% in PCIA and decreased 5.6% for the generation rate. And the last one is the worst case scenario. We increased 19% in PCIA and decreased 10% for the generation rate. For our revenue assumptions, the primary source of our income is from the retail sale of electricity into 4 different customer classes. The first one is for the 233,000 accounts for the residential accounts. We project $76 million or 33% of our total revenue. The second one is for 32,000 commercial and industrial accounts. We project $114 million or 50% of total revenue. Then 5,000 agricultural accounts, we project $38 million of revenue or 16% of total revenue. And the last one is for 2,000 street and traffic lights accounts. We project $1.5 million for the revenue and 1% of total revenue. Our average electric generating rates is about 6.9 cents per kilowatt hours, which matches PG&E rates minus the PCIA. The total sales estimate is based on 4% of our rate, and we estimate about 0.5% for uncollectible accounts, and the total load growth rates are forecast by customer class at 0.5%. The following slides will illustrate the significant impact of PCIA over our revenue for the fiscal year 18-19. For the base case, we project revenue at $228 million, and the PCIA is $101 million, which is about 31% of the total. This is for the best case. The revenue is projected at $237 million, and the PCIA is projected at $98 million, which is 29% of the total. And then this one is for the worst case scenario. Revenue is projected at $219 million, and the PCIA is projected at $104 million, which is 32% of the total. As mentioned earlier during our previous agenda item, we propose to adjust our organization chart by adding the Energy Programs Manager position and the Community Outreach and Events Coordinator bilingual position, and also retitle the Energy Planning Manager to the position Supply Analyst and delete the Finance Manager position. The impact is a reduction of $16,000 or 0.01% of revenue. This is our proposed organization chart. Our total full-time staff will increase to 24 staff, and our total part-time staff will remain at 3. For our other operating expenses assumption, data manager and PG&E service fees, we have contract with GridX to provide data management, billing, and call center operation services. The data management fees are based on a fixed price per meter per month. Service fees paid to PG&E consists of a charge of 35 cents per account per month for meter data posting services and for processing our energy charges and customer payments. For professional and legal services, we include day-to-day accounting services, annual external audit, consulting support for scheduling coordination and CRR management services, power resources, with risk management support, customer portal, and IT security and related work. Marketing consulting fees for video production, graphic design, and customer survey. And for legal services, most of our budget is for energy procurement and regulatory advocacy, with a small amount expected for the general counsel support. For general and administration, include ordinary business expenses such as conferences and professional development, rent, liability insurance, office supplies, phones and internet, small equipment and software, subscriptions, copier lease and usage, travel, and business meals. It also includes a CalCCA membership dues, which will provide the legal support on legislative and regulatory challenges. Overall, the non-power supply expenses is less than 5% of our revenue. The key drivers are the data manager, call center services, and PG&E services fee, and they are estimated at $3.9 million or 1.7% of our revenue. For capital expenditure, we propose to acquire an agenda management program for assembly and distribution of board minutes, agenda, and live streaming, and a vehicle for outreach activities, and IT equipment for new staff. As mentioned during our previous agenda item, we are on the right track. We will pay off all of our debt, which include a $3 million non-revolving line of credit and $2.6 million revolving line of credit to River City Bank, $563,000 loan from the County of Santa Cruz, and we will retire the guarantee secure from the 3 counties, all by the end of September. To fulfill our key goals, which are to ensure fiscal stability, reduce customer rates, and invest in our local economy, we propose 2 basic strategies for funding rebates and programs. Strategy 1A or 1B is to address the funding under the best and best case scenarios. Strategy 2 is to manage funding under the worst case scenario. For this proposed budget, we are using strategy 1B under the base case scenario. The following slides will illustrate the calculation of the program's rebate and reserve for 18-19 and the following 5 years. For 18-19, we recommend that programs are funded at 2% of total revenue, and then the remaining surplus revenue will be allocated at 20% to rebates and 80% for reserves. For 19-20, programs will remain at 2% of total revenue, and then the remaining surplus revenue we will allocate 30% for rebates and 70% for reserve. For 2021, same thing for program, we will fund 2% of our total revenue, and for rebates, we will allocate 40% of our surplus revenue, and for reserve, we will allocate 60% of our surplus revenue. And for fiscal year 21-22 and forward, our projected reserve will meet our target, which is the 50% of our operating expenses. Therefore, for reserve, we will keep 50% of our operating expenses as the reserve balance, and then the remaining surplus revenue, we will keep 50%, we will allocate 50% for program and the other 50% to rebate. Same calculation for 22-23 and 23-24. And this chart will illustrate our projected revenues, rebates, reserves from 17-18 to 23-24. The unused 17-18 program funding balance will roll over to 18-19. Therefore, we will have a program reserve balance of over $7 million as of 18-19. For rebates, we project $7.5 million or 3.3% of total revenue for 18-19. As a result, reserve balance is over $68 million as of 18-19. And this chart displays the growth in our reserve balance compared to the projected revenue and surpluses before rebates and programs. And our 5-year projection assumptions, PG&E rate will be decreased by 7.5% in January 2019, flat in 2020, and then increases by 2.5% each year. PCIA will be increased by 15% in 2019 and remain flat afterwards. Annual load growth at 0.5%, and then we will use 3 to 5% inflation rates each year for the non-power supply expenses. How is our budget compared to the other CCAs nearby? This chart clearly illustrates that our proposed budget is favored in every expense categories. And this chart illustrates that our proposed programs fund and reserve are significantly higher than the other CCAs. To conclude, despite all the challenges that we are facing, our 2018-19 proposed operating budget, which is based on the base case scenario, has projected our revenues at $228 million, total operating expenses at $186 million, programs funded at $4.6 million, and rebates funded at $7.5 million, contributing $30 million for reserves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one thing to add to this presentation. Please remember that the only thing that you're approving today is the funding and any allocation of surplus for only 18-19. There will be time, I'm pretty sure, in the future to come back and revisit with the appropriate allocation of those funds for future years.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you for that budget presentation. Very, very encouraging. Any comments from the board? Ms. Kaufman-Gomez.
Sorry, I do have some questions. I know in the budget you have the NEM accounts, and I know we're paying more than PG&E on that. Are we going to do anything with, I mean, if people understand really what that's about, those that are in that industry, do you think that we're going to see more interest with those trying to get the NEM accounts, especially if they're going to be turning out a better rate in terms of what our budget would be affected by, or bringing more of that line of business in that's going to affect our budget?
Yeah, I think that this is surplus generation, not just the actual rate that's offered for the actual generation that happens during the day, or the cost associated with the generation that we provide at nighttime. I think the most likely scenario that would impact the decision will have to do more with changing into time of use. PG&E is going to go into time of use rates in 2020, I believe, and that will be mandatory. Everybody's going to be on the time of use, and they're also going to change what they charge during those times to shift the higher cost to the nighttime because that reflects the wholesale prices for them, unlike what they do now. And that is the more likely thing that is going to make people think twice before they actually make the investment. It's not on a net generation. Net generation brings in very little money for them.
Okay. And I have, can you talk a little bit about the resource adequacy of the 12%? You know, what's in this here? You know, we understand what you're purchasing on the carbon-free and the renewable, but a little bit more of the resource adequacy. Are these our programs? Or can we talk a little bit more about what that 12% would encompass?
Sure. We are obligated to make sure that we acquire capacity. Now, acquiring capacity is different than acquiring energy. Energy is actually something that gets produced, it gets put into the grid, and we end up consuming it. The capacity is just basically making sure that there are reserve generation sitting out there, not working, sitting idle, just waiting in case we have to call on it.
Okay.
We, as well as every other energy service provider, has an obligation to resource adequacy, and we go acquire it on a year-by-year basis.
Okay. And the project at the utility over in Moss Landing for the battery generation, how is that going to help us in terms of having a local source for the power supply? Is it going to be something that we're purchasing are we procuring part of that for RCCA? How is that going to work in terms of that relationship with the storage in Moss Landing?
Yeah, PG&E is the one that's building it and acquiring it. Some of the costs will be allocated to us as well as everybody else that's in the PG&E service territory. So that's how the impact is going to be. It's just basically a CPUC will say, you got to pay your share of having to have that resource in there because it's required to keep the reliability of the system. But we offered to PG&E that we partner with them, but we haven't heard back from them. Not likely that they would want to partner with us on anything, but at least we are supportive of what they're trying to do.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips?
On that, I just would say there are actually 2 battery storage plants that are planned there, and the company that bought out Dynergy, I've met with them a number of times, and they're going to have, and that's going to be in the existing plant, not what PG&E is going to build, and so it'll have very little environmental concerns because they're just bringing the batteries in and putting them in this, and that's why they bought that plant, is battery storage. And they have a big battery storage plant down in Texas, but this is going to be the biggest in the world. They're going to invest $300 million into that, besides what PG&E is doing. The only problem is it's only going to be 5 jobs when they're all through with the $300 million investment. But it is pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. McShane.
Yeah. Tiffany, what happens when the rebates go out? Are we literally going to be cutting checks to all of our, I mean, is it going to be a credit on the bill? Can you just explain that again? I don't recall.
It will be a credit on the bills.
Okay. So easy enough. And then in the programs department, and maybe this is a question for JR, I realize that the CAC is going to be looking at what programs are, to be considered, and ultimately, as I understand it, they'll decide on the programs and come back to the policy board. Can we just get a word on that? There's great interest there. I know I've engaged some constituents on, what the programs will amount to.
Yeah, that's a great question, Director McShane. I'd like to use the term collaboration. So I think we're here to both collaborate based on where we see the marketplace going, as well as facilitating feedback from the Community Advisory Council as well. So we're going to them next Thursday in the morning to kind of roll out a really wonderful staff report in terms of kind of our recommendations moving forward, kind of leaning heavily on transportation electrification, looking at bringing up low-income solar plus storage and EV infrastructure, as well as kind of looking to the bigger picture of what it means to electrify the region and all the nuts and bolts that kind of are going to be baked into that. So I think it's a really comprehensive and strategic approach. But yes, we're definitely here to facilitate any feedback or concerns or anything like that to make sure that, the dollars that are flowing back into the region make sense for everyone.
Sure, and that's helpful. If I just may offer the feedback, I hope that this board is offered opportunity prior to you coming up with or while the CAC is dreaming big for the programs, to offer some insight. I know I have some opinions. I'm sure we all would have opinions on where those programs should be focused. It's a lot of money each year. So I don't know whether that's a Survey Monkey or just, hey, email JR with your feedback. I would appreciate some direction in that.
Yes, duly noted, and we'll make sure to bring everybody to this table to make sure we can solicit everyone's feedback about this. Again, as this being our first year of being able to kind of invest in the programs, we got a long, beautiful journey ahead of us. So we're going to have a lot of time to collaborate on this and make sure that each county and all the different constituents, we're going to be able to fit as many needs as we can. Again, we don't have tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, but we want to spend those dollars effectively across the whole Tri-County region. But yes, 100% agree with you.
Okay, and then maybe this is more a question for Tom. And Ms. Kaufman-Gomez alluded to this earlier with the questions about legislation. I think it was front page of today's paper, maybe yesterday's paper, at least the local Monterey one, that 2045 we are doing away with gas generated electricity. I can't help but think into the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years, what sort of animal PG&E is going to be, and how that could impact our business. We're firing up legislation. They've got people in the legislature that will carry legislation. I just would love to get your insight, from your crystal ball, as to the regulatory and ever-changing legislative sort of dynamic in our business.
Yeah, the SB 100 called for going to 100% carbon-free by 2045. And not all of it will be mandated to come from solar and wind. Some of it will eventually come from hydro resources. And definitely, this has been in the works for a couple of years, and I think it is a doable goal, and I'm predicting that we are likely to get there a whole lot sooner than 2045. The way things are going and the way the prices for solar and wind are predicted over the next number of years, I don't see why we need to stay or to wait until 2045. Generally, the IOUs will probably take their time because they don't want to move in unless they have to, and they want to make sure that they rate base everything. I think we can, at least for us, we are at 100% carbon free. We probably can increase the amount of renewables that come from solar and wind in our portfolio beyond what's required by the RPS and get there a lot sooner. I don't think we're going to need legislation to slow us down. I think the call that the governor made was by 2045, not only that he wants to have the electricity market be carbon free, he is calling on the state to be carbon free in all of its sectors. So he's he's targeting the transportation as well as the industrial sector, basically saying take fossil fuels out of it altogether, not just from the electricity generation, but from every sector in the economy. That was more of a directive. It's not in the legislation, so he approved the legislation, and that is going to be the law. But the directive that he gave, I don't know how easy that's going to be to implement. I can't venture a guess because I'm not in the transportation business or the home building business. But that at this point is just a directive, and it doesn't require legislation. It may in the future. The next governor and the next group of legislators, they may try to push for that legislatively. I don't know. And maybe then we will need to get involved. But again, we are in the electricity provision services, so I can speak only for my industry, and I can tell you for certain that I think we can meet that goal a whole lot sooner than 2045.
Okay, maybe last question. Last I checked, in the last 12 or 13 years, my PG&E bill doubled. The rate we're paying for power, it's going to go up, and we are pegged to PG&E. Granted, there's the rebate, and this sort of begs some comments I think that the chair and I and maybe others will have just based on feedback from customers. Because of the way we're set up, I'm in the lucky position, as we all are, to get calls from constituents that might be feisty at what they're having to allocate in their personal budget for their power needs, and it's going up. And I guess, this is a little off topic with the budget, but we just need to be prepared as an organization to respond to that. I don't know. I would sure love to really beat the rates that are our service, area, that folks have to pay for their power.
The distribution and transmission, as well as meter reading and a variety of other things that we have nothing to do with. That's the portion of the bill that keeps going higher and higher, and expect it to go even further up because now there's a legislation that got approved that says PG&E and the other investor-owned utilities can recover the cost of having to rebuild the system because of the fires that are raging all throughout the state. In the past, the responsibility for rebuilding and paying people to rebuild was coming out of the pockets of the shareholders. That's no longer the case. I think that money is going to be rate-based, so do expect that your bill is going to go up again. And we will put together a one-pager for you that you can share with your constituents. But we are not responsible for why the rates are going up, and most of the increase in cost is coming more on the distribution and the transmission side than it is on the generation side.
Thank you. That's all.
I just want to make one comment. Some of our toughest decisions are going to be what we're going to do with the excess revenues we have, and there's going to be a lot of competition, and some are going to win and some are going to be delayed, I'll put. But in the end, whatever that decision is going to be, it's for the betterment of our cleaner environment and living within our economic means too. So there's going to be some competition, there's going to be some tough choices we have to make here of what we're going to do to provide those benefits, if you will, that in the future. But it's coming, but we want to do the best for the most as soon as possible, but we can't do everything for everybody at the same time. Yes, Mr. Haffa.
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to follow up the line of conversation about rates and the perception of our customers. So I think it's really important when the refund is processed, that it not just be a little line item on their bill, because people won't even notice that. We need to have a plan, and hopefully the staff doesn't. If not, we need to have a plan so that there's some kind of direct communication letting them know exactly what that rebate is and who's responsible for it. So
I think that's important too, because I was going to mention that too. We have explained, we'll be at parity or less, and we're going to be less than PG&E, but I've been getting some calls too that they think this line item is an addition and not, they don't see that it's rolling out of what PG&E's costs were. And we have to explain that as simply and directly as we can. And when we give the rebates, I would like to do it as soon as possible and not wait until the end of the year or first of next year. But, well, we can discuss that when we talk about director comments, maybe.
We have two line items, by the way, in the bill. You would notice them in the one pager that describes our cost. One that says, here's your rebate up to date. We haven't gotten it yet, but here's we keep revising that number to show that now the rebate is up to this amount. And in December, the rebate will be out, and we'll do whatever we can in order to communicate that point to everyone.
Very good. Any other questions from the board? Ms. Kaufman-Gomez.
Sorry, there's a lot of information this afternoon, so it's nice to hear. When it came to the amount going into programs, we have a 2% and a 2% for the next couple years, and then it goes into 50% of the surplus. Can we correlate that to, if 2% is a couple million, what is 50%? Because I didn't really see a value of how much we would potentially be ramping up for surplus to go to programs.
Yeah, I think we've tried to kind of show how the calculations work. It's 2% of the total revenue all the way up till the point when we have sufficient amount of money in reserves. Then after that, we're not pegging it to total revenue anymore. We're basically saying we'll see what the surplus is after we take a little bit just to keep the reserves topped at 50% of total operating expenses. Then anything left after that gets split between rebates and programs. So the calculations just go a little bit different once we reach that 50% of operating expenses on the reserve side.
Should be significant, especially if we're not having to put the money towards the reserves.
Yeah, as you can see that in future years, and this is assuming the base case, and again, all these numbers will change, I can assure you, once we get a decision on the PCIA. It looks like we can have in future years roughly about $10 million in programs and another $10 million for rebate. This is, by the way, annual dollars. This is not cumulative.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the public, from the audience? I think I saw one hand to come up. If you would come up if you have something to say, please come up and address us.
I'm Dave Lessicar again, Seaside, and briefly, especially in light of the customers' concerns about rates, I guess first of all I would suggest that PG&E rates, one reason they're so high is they are required by the Public Utilities Commission to commit a lot of money to programs to subsidize or encourage customers switching to higher energy efficiency. So that's built into the rates. But also, I think that, MBCP should, put an emphasis on increasing those rebates. And one thing that seems to me that if local electricity generation turns out to be more expensive than what we can get from New Mexico or, utility scale solar projects out in the desert, then I think that it should be lower prioritized or just not pursued. And then, but I can certainly see program expenses increasing due to EV electrification. That's about all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Yes, sir.
Hi, Seth K. Brunn. I'm a member from the Community Advisory Council, although I'm not speaking for them today. I just want to compliment the staff on the budget, both the success in achieving things and the presentation. There's a lot of information in there comparing to other agencies and best case, worst case scenario. I also just wanted to echo the comments that Bruce McPherson made and Mr. Bacci about how the projections are not commitments we're making now. And, like Bruce said, these are going to be hard decisions. 50-50 is just a projection of what we might do in the future years. And I'm bringing that up because I think it's important that we communicate that to the public so that we don't have people with an expectation on one side or the other of those debates that it's going to be a certain way, because I think that could lead to disappointment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments from the public? Bring the budget discussion back to the board. Any other further comments from board members?
Move the budget.
Budget's been moved by Mr. Termini, seconded by Director Brown. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Approved unanimously. Okay. We will now move to item number 17. I just want to in today's Chronicle, and we know, or was it yesterday? Today's Chronicle, full-page ad on community choices leading the charge on California's climate action, and Monterey Bay Community Power is, and this is a huge conference in San Francisco today, as you all know, and so we're part of the mix, and we're part of the reason that it's going as well as it is in California for sure. I thought you'd just be interested in seeing that. It's nice to see. I think that also and it's been discussed a little too about, I've had some calls on, gee, you're charging us more. That line item, is that in addition to what you were charging? And no, it was in the PG&E line that was bundled into a line. We do have, 98% acceptance of our product, so to speak. But there's some that are pretty irate about, hey, you're charging us more, you promised you'd charge us less or not more. I don't know if anybody else is getting those comments. If we can get those messages out to people, or if you could give us a simplified, maybe a letter to the editor and all the newspapers or something, I think would really be nice to do before we get to have a better handle and going forward with PCIA and so forth about what the rates will be, but to explain it now, because they're getting their bills now, and I think there's a little. Is anybody else received that confusion?
So Chairman, just to add, there's a one-pager being developed, and you just told JR to accelerate putting that one-pager together. We'll get it to you by no later than the end of this week. And it will go out to all of you, as well as the operations board member and
I think
community
it'd
advisory
be
council.
good for maybe to even do it as a news release if we could, or something to the newspapers to say, we can, maybe it's when we're debt reduction, we could include it with that, or although I think it could be separate.
We could go in the utility bills for us as well when we're mailing them out. If we have something that we can include, we can check. No.
I wish I can tell you we are able to do bill stuffers, but PG&E is a little.
Well, I'm talking about ours when we are sending out the water bill at the city, including, because there is a bit of a newsletter that we provide, and if we have some space to be able to offer this as a service to the CCA, to put it in our own package that goes out, not what you're sending out, but
Put it in the water bill, or
Right,
put it
that's
in
what I'm
the
saying.
waste management district. Go with one of the other utilities.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll be a little more friendly than PG&E.
We'll give it a shot.
Okay, give that a mention.
And we'll have something to the. We'll see if we can get something to the press. Hopefully, sometime this week.
Good. I think that's necessary.
I've-
Mr. Phillips?
Yeah, if we get something to us, and then we can put out on our little newsletter that we send out to all the customers. But we're getting some of the same questions, and I got some of the same questions from my wife. She went, "Wait, what's this?"
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
what are you getting us into? Yeah, right.
yeah, I've got like neighborhood or the network, something about it's a website that's a community posting, next door bulletin board. So I've been putting some comments out there to be very clear about what this is about, and one of them actually commented that they saw the ad in Good Times this morning. So PSAs are working out there.
So I just wanted to amplify what Mr. Phillips said. Sunday night I had a little dinner party at my house, and my daughter, who recently moved to Seaside about 3 months ago, mentioned, "What's this?" And since she's my daughter, I can tell her, "No, you're not going to opt out."
Yeah.
But
Good luck in my house.
But I thought I did a pretty good job of explaining it to her and to our neighbors. And I was chatting with one of the outreach people today before the meeting, and he told me the kind of lousy answer you just got about the utility stuffer. So I would really suggest, yeah, we look to the water companies, waste management or whatever, to, you know, see if we can work with that, because it needs to get out to the people when they open it, not, you know.
Well, yeah, we can see what we can do in that regard. Yes, Ms. Brown.
So I've been getting similar expressions of concern, but another one that I want to add, and this may be particular to the community that I'm in, but a lot of people who have been expressed that frustration, and it may not be so much over the rates or the change, but they're saying, well, no, I'm sticking with the union, you know, PG&E is union, and so I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about that, and it might be worth having something that alerts people to the fact that we're actually working, you know, PG&E is still in play, and we're just, you know, how that works, because I think people are saying, well, it's clean power or labor, right? And that's not really what's going on.
Can I just recommend that in order to comply with the Brown Act, you might want to agendize this for the next meeting?
Oh, sorry.
I'm just,
Yeah.
as the conversation is progressing, I think it might be appropriate
Yeah.
to agendize it.
Okay.
Maybe one last thing, just because, JR, not to add more, the more one-pagers, the better, honestly. Like the website, I am still passing out copies of this black and white thing from March. If we have any color or anything at all that you can load me up with, I mean, I pass out and pass out and pass out, and PDFs would be great, even if it's the same one. I mean, this is not bad, so just loading us up, you know, and I'm going to give kudos to JR's team. I mean, they are on the hunt. Just yesterday, we were able to kill a pretty negative and toxic thread on a 10,000, 11,000 person Facebook group in South Salinas. So keep it up. We're there to work with you.
Yeah, and thanks, Director McShane. We're hustling as best as we can, so we're developing that one pager, as Tom said, and we're just going to try to empower you with as much as kind of short, concise, succinct information that you can then distill to your constituents. So that's our role here. But on a positive note, I would like to say that because of that CEC proposal or grant that we're getting, we're actually going to be hosting a workshop in partnership with MBARD, CEC, Center for Sustainable Energy on October 4th from 2 to 5 at Salinas City Hall. But we're also looking towards, in the future, probably January, February, hosting a more kind of detail-oriented, what does it all mean for the region, hopefully in Watsonville in January or February. So this is kind of going to be the linchpin around the time that people get the rebates and whatnot, so kind of bring everything together. So just wanted to give one little final plug on that.
Yes, Mr. Phillips.
I have another meeting, so I'm going to have to take my leave. But I wanted to say, as you know, I was the deciding vote for the county whether we join that, and I was getting lobbied both ways on it. You were lobbying me, and I got a lot of people that were very angry when I voted to join this. I got to say, here at my first meeting, seeing what we've accomplished or what you've accomplished, and all that has been done, we sure made the right decision, and I'm impressed.
Very good. Thank you. And people will learn more about it, the details of it. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Phillips. And we are, let's see, the public has commented. Any comments, public? Okay. We are going to move into closed session to discuss the public employee performance evaluation. Is there anybody from the public who would like to comment on that before we go into closed session? Yeah, I do not expect that there will be anything reportable coming from that. Any other questions from the board? What we're going to do then is adjourn this session. And thank you very much for coming and your interest. And we will now go into closed session.
Chair, you might want to announce that we'll reconvene an open session after the closed session.
Absolutely. Yeah, we will reconvene after the closed session. Thank you. Okay. We will reconvene the September 12th meeting of Monterey Bay Community Power. After closed session, Council, do you have anything to report?
The only reportable action from the closed session is that the policy board voted to create a temporary ad hoc subcommittee to perform a performance review of Mr. Hibashi and how he's doing in his role as CEO for Monterey Bay Community Power.
Thank you. Okay, it's the action taken. No action needed, so this meeting's adjourned.